Alright my friends, welcome to this section. So in this lesson, I'm going to be showing you an overview of the project we are going to be building in this section. So this is an e-commerce application which we are going to be calling T-Store. It's not so much of a big e-commerce project, but here you are going to combine pretty much everything we learned about React Router and implement it in this project. Alright, if we use the navbar and click on the product, we go to the product page and we have a bunch of products, right? And we can also click add to cart, and we have our cart updating up here. If we click another one, we should now have 3. And if you also click on this cart, we should go to the cart page where we can now click on checkout, which requires us to log in before we can check out, or we can go to the checkout page, right? So the authentication here, to make it easy for you guys, we're using an API that provides not just the store data, but also dummy user data, which we can use for authentication. So over here at my Postman, you can see this is the API, fixstoreapi.com. And if you go to the endpoint /users and click send again, you can see that we have a list of users, the user's address, user ID, email, username, and password, which we can use as a dummy user object. Now let's copy this email and test our authentication. If we copy this email, head over to our app. This is not a username, it's actually an email. So as you can see, if I paste the email over here and then we copy the password over here like this, and then we paste it, we submit, and then we go back to our cart and then our checkout. Now we can access the checkout page and we have a shipping address and the biller name is John Doe, which if we come back to our Postman, you can see the username, first name is John, the last name is Doe, and we have a bunch of users over here that you can use to test this application. So the good news is we are not going to be building any backend or building any Firebase for this project. You can get all the data from Fixstore API, which is providing all the data for us, as you can see. You can also go to the website to see the list of endpoints they have, in case you want to be clear about what's going on. We have the product endpoint, which you can see we have a bunch of products over here. We have the cart, users, and login token. We'll be mostly using this product and the users because we're going to be building our own cart page from scratch. All right. Another thing I would like to show you is the functionality here. If you click on this shop from the navbar, it goes back to the home page and scrolls us down, right? You will see how we build this using the navigate function of React Router, right? If you go back to the product page, we click on the page, it goes back to the home page and brings us down. And if you click on one of these categories, let's say men's, it's still the same page, the product page we've been clicking before, but now it's going to only show men's clothing, right? But the point I'm trying to derive is we are using the same endpoint, but with an optional URL parameter. So that is not something we learned during this course, adding optional URL parameters. As you can see, product / women's clothing, and we can still use product, which is not going to return page not found, right? So in this project, we are not going to only combine all of the things we've learned before. We'll also see how we can manipulate routes and navigation to achieve our goals. All right. And lastly, if we put on a path that doesn't exist, we should see page not found over here. All right. Now that's an overview of the app we'll be building. Join me in the next lesson where we'll download the boilerplate code and then we'll begin building this application. All right, guys. So this is the repo that contains the boilerplate code you need to continue this project. I have put a link to it in the description below. So clone the repo and then let's continue from there. Here it is. In here, I added all the required packages for this project. As you can see, we just need Axios, React icons, and obviously React Router DOM. So if you hit Command or Control J, the terminal is going to pull up, so you don't need to go to your terminal, from your Windows or the external terminal you have. All you need to do is run npm install. We hit enter. So while that's running, I just want to bring your attention to the source folder. As you can see, I have 3 subfolders inside of our source folder. We have the assets, where I've added all the assets. We have the components folder, where there are all the components we need for this project. And then we have the pages folder, which some of you might haven't seen before, right? A pages folder. Now, it's always useful to separate your components from your pages. Although in React, everything is a component, but you should have a pages folder where you can where you can bring all your components together to form one single page. So for instance, for our home page, we can simply have something like home.jsx, and then in here, all the homepage components we want, we'll just go to our components folder and build all the components, and then back in our homepage.jsx, we can import all of them to form one big page component, right? That's the usefulness of this. So that's why we have the pages folder where we'll build the pages, and then we'll import all the components we need for each page for that to work. I'm just going to delete this as we are going to do it in the future lessons, so I don't want to confuse any of you guys. But all the components we need essentially are here, and that's because this course is not about building projects from scratch. It's more about learning to use React Router DOM. So I don't think it's relevant for us to build every single component and its complexity, right? We also have the CSS files for the pages and the components. This is going to make our work easier because we just need to call the class name, and then the styling is going to apply for us. All right. Back in our app.js, we have everything just the way it is when you create a new React app, so we can work things up from scratch. So we haven't touched anything here. In our index.js also, we haven't touched anything here. And the upcoming lessons will actually work on these pages. All right. So that's our project setup. In the next lesson, we'll start working on our project and building it from the ground up. See you there. All right, my friends, welcome to this lesson. In this lesson, we are going to do some basic route configuration to allow our application perform navigation. So we are just going to be doing like the baseline configuration we need to start using navigation in our application. All right, but before we do that, let's actually run our project and see how it looks like in the browser. So npm, no, not install, npm start. So you should see something like this, and if you do, it's actually fine, it's okay. That's exactly what we wanted. Okay, back to our code. Now we're going to configure routing for our application. And if you recall, within this course, we said we needed something known as the browser router, which is the baseline for navigation using React Router. So all we need to do is install browser router. I don't know why, like this, and then we just wrap our entire application inside of it. So browser router opening and closing tag, and then we cut our app component and paste it in here. Now with this, our entire application will be able to use React Router. So the browser router is the baseline for routing within our application. Without it, we can't make use of any other React Router components to navigate. All right, so that's what we needed to do first of all. Now an app.js file, let's just clear this whole div over here. We don't want this div, or we might leave the div, but we'll remove the class name so we don't get any styling. And then we can also delete the logo over here. All right. So if you remember when we spoke about route configuration, we said it's better to create a different file for your routes. So you can configure your routes in another file, and then you can import them into your app.js and map them. So that's exactly what we're going to do now. We'll create a route.js file, and this is going to have an export const app routes, and it's going to be a list, and this is going to be a list of all of our routes, right? But back in our app.js file, we can actually start importing our app navbar and adding it to our application, because like we said, the navbar needs to be in all the pages, so we don't have to create a different route for it to navigate to. So the navbar component needs to be in all the pages, and that means we can simply call the nav. Let's import it first. Import navbar. So the navbar is already there because it's part of our component folder over here, so don't worry where we are getting that from. It's inside of your component folder, so you can import it from component navbar. So the navbar is going to be the first component in our app, so we'll just add that navbar just like this, and then below the navbar we are going to map all of our routes, right? So to do that, we need a routes component, which is just the plural of route, right? So first of all, let's import routes from React Router DOM. Import routes, and this routes with the S is basically a wrapper for individual routes. So we can't use a route if it is not nested inside of a route, right? We can't use the singular if it's not nested inside of the plural. So in here we're going to call the routes just like this. Inside of our routes wrapper is where we are going to wrap each of our routes, but for now we don't have any routes available, so we are just going to leave it at this. If we head back to our browser, let's see what that looks like. You can see we have our navbar. The navbar is here, and then we have a blank page here. That's because we don't have any pages yet, so the navbar is just there with a blank page. All right, some of you might ask, why do we have the navbar over here? For those of you that were paying much attention in the previous lessons, we had the navbar in the index.js file right above our app component. So you can have the navbar right above your app component in the index.js file, and you can also have it just above your routes over here, and it's still going to work. But the reason why I specifically put this one inside of the app.js file is because eventually this button we are seeing on here, the login button, we want it to disappear whenever the user is already authenticated, which means whenever the user is already logged in, this login button is going to disappear. So that means the navbar is going to need a state variable, and the state variable is going to come from the app component function over here. If it was inside of this place, it's going to be difficult for us to add a prop to it when it's inside the index.js file. For that sole reason, we can have our navbar inside of here, and it works perfectly just the way it will do if we had it inside of our index.js file above our app component. All right, so like I said, inside of our route is where we can put all of our sub routes, and then inside of this routes.js, we're going to actually start adding routes as soon as we have our pages ready, and that's what we're going to do in the next lesson. Thank you so much for watching this. All right guys, in this lesson we're going to create our home page. So if we go back to the completed version in the browser, you can see we have one section over here, and then we have the category section over here. So these are separate components that we can import, and you are going to see how we do it. So I really need you guys to pay attention and code along with me. Back in our code, we just need to create a new page under our pages folder, and I like to name my pages starting with a capital letter. So I'm just going to say home.jsx, not js, just make sure it's jsx, because that's what we're going to be using throughout this course. But if you still want to use js, that's fine. And then we'll just const home should be equal to an arrow function. Then below we can export default home, just like this. All right, and then we're just going to return a div, and inside this div is where we're going to create these two sections. We have the first section that has a female and this text, and then the second section, which is basically the categories where we can click these buttons and these images. So we have 3 images to be precise, and first of all we're going to import them, and then we're going to create components to handle all of them. So if you go to our assets folder, we have all the image. We have BG image, which is the female, and then we have men's clothing, which is the men's clothing image, and then the women's clothing as well. So back in our home.jsx, we just need to import those. So bring this down, and then we import. We're going to name the first one home BG, just like this. And then this is going to be from. So we just need to navigate to our assets folder, image, and then the bg image.png we have over here. So that should be //. As you can see, we have suggestion. Oh, we just need one // actually, // and then we have assets, and then / images, and then / as you can see, bg image.png. Now you might not get suggestion for the last one. Just make sure you type it out just as it is in the file name over here, and you should be fine. Now we've imported this image for this woman. Oh, these are actually mixed up. This should be for men's and this should be for women, but we'll just import the two of them back in our code. Right, so we'll just say import men's clothing, and then this should be from . We can actually copy this path since they are in the same folder, and then we'll change the file name for the image. So this should now be men's clothing. So we have men dash cloth, just like this, and then we can copy and paste this again for our women's, and then we simply change this to women's clothing, and this should be women, just like this. So if we go back to our browser and we hit the refresh, if you don't see any error, it should mean everything is fine. And you can also check your terminal over here, Command or Control J, you can see everything is fine, no errors, we just have a warning. All right, now the components for our home page, if we look at the finished product, we need this component. So this whole component we're seeing over here is the hero component, and that's exactly what we're going to import. So the hero component is part of the components, is inside the components folder that came with the boilerplate. So we're just going to import hero. Don't have a suggestion. Okay, let's just say from ./components/hero, and then that's the first component we need to add over here. It's a component on its own, and actually we don't need this home bg because the hero component has it already. You can see we have the human img, so this is the hero component. It has the data for this whole section of the page, right? So that's cool. We just have to import it. So yeah, we can remove this first image import, but we definitely need these two to construct the category section. All right, so let's go back and refresh. If we go to our development tab and hit refresh, you can see it doesn't work, so something is wrong. Let's go back to our code. The reason why it doesn't work might be clear to some of you guys, and that's because we haven't added any routes. So let's do that actually. So we're going to import our home route. Now for other components, we're going to use lazy imports to improve performance for our application. So since this is the landing page, we don't need to lazy load it, we need to load it immediately, right? So in here, we're going to create a new object for our home route, and that is going to take a path. So the path is going to be / since it's our home path, and then we can say component is going to be our home component. So another property we need is the required auth object. So this is going to be useful when we build pages that need route guarding. So here we'll just say requires auth, just like this. Since it's the home page, it has to be false. So this is our first route, and then back in our app.js, we can now map our app routes. Before then, we obviously need to import them. Import, it should be app route. All right. Once we have that imported inside of our routes component, we can just add curly braces and call the app routes, and then we can do .map, and then this should be route. For each route, we want to return a route, a singular route, right? So in here, we can just see we need to give it a key. Obviously, key will be route.path, and then we need to add the exact keyword, and then path is going to be again our route.path, and then element, last but not the least, element is going to be our route.component, just like this. So this is everything we need for our routes. All right, let's head back to our browser, give it a refresh. We don't have anything working right now. Okay, what's the problem? So the problem here is the element prop doesn't want a value, it wants a component, right? And we gave it a value. We gave it the value of route.component. So we need to turn this into a component by just adding angle brackets to it, just like this, and then a /, just like that. If we head back, you can see it now works. Now this is our hero component, just like we have in the finished part of the project. We have our hero component, and then down here we have the categories. Now back in the development tab, this is the only thing we have for now. We have our hero component working, and then we need to add the categories component right below it. All right, now let's head back to our code. Within our home.jsx, inside of our pages folder, we can now add our categories. If we head back to the finished application tab, you can see we have a HR here, a line that crosses the two sections. So we can just go back to our code and add that. It's a basic HR tag, just like this. And then we also need a categories tag, so that should be That's a h2 tag, and then we can write categories just like this. Back to our browser, our development tab, we now have our categories and the line. All right, let's actually add the categories now. Now back in our code, if you look at the component again, we have a category card.jsx file, and that takes two props, the image prop and the title prop, and then it returns a card for us for a category. So back in our home page, we can just import this category card, import category card like this, and then we create a div for it for the section, and then we can call the two category cards since we have two of them, the women's and the men's category only. So we can just use two of those components. So let's use the first one, category card, the first, and then we can just copy and paste this. Now if we go back to it, it takes an image prop and a title prop. So back to our home page, we need to add those props. So image src, so the image is going to be one of these. So the first one is the men's clothing, so we'll just copy that, paste in here, and then the title. So in the finished product, we actually interchange the title, so this should be men's, and then over here we can actually copy and paste this again. Oh, I cut it, Control C, and then paste it, and then here we can call the women clothing, and then we can just see women over here, just like this. Now let's head back to our browser and see how it looks. Back to our development tab, you can see it looks quite huge and it fills the whole screen. But if we go back to the complete project, you can see it's just two cards. So that means we need to style this container to just return two cards rather than two huge images like this. All right, again, like I said, all of our styles are already in our styles.css. We just need to call the right class name for it. So this container over here that holds the category cards, you can just call class name, and then it takes a class name of cat-cont, just like this. So that's category container. If you go back to our browser, refresh the page, something is wrong actually. It still doesn't work after the refresh. All right, okay, yeah, that's because we haven't imported our style.css file. So now we can just do import style, and that should be /style/styles, it's an s.css. Then we can go back to our code, refresh. All right, as you can see, it works perfectly fine. It looks exactly like the finished product we have over here. All right, so we finished building our home page. In future lessons, we are going to come back to it because we need to implement a functionality where if we click on this shop link from the navbar, it goes and then it comes back down. Now in our application, we don't have any links working at the moment. So whenever I want to implement the functionality of scrolling to these categories when the shop link is clicked, we will definitely revisit the home page and you'll see how we'll use React Router to achieve that goal. But for now, we've built our home page the way we wanted, and let's move on to the next lesson. Bye for now. All right guys, welcome to this lesson. In this lesson, we'll be building out the products page. Now let's head to the finished version of the application and see what we need to do. So over here in the /product, from the navbar, if you click on the products link, you can see that we have a list of products, and then we have we can select to filter only women's and only men's, right? So this is the product page. Now I want to bring your attention to these categories. So if you click on the shop from the navbar link, it's going to take you to these categories we built in the previous lesson, where you can select the women's clothing or the men's clothing, right? So if you click the women's, if you notice, we are still in the products page, but from the URL up here, you can see that we have a URL parameter. Whilst if we click on the products page, we don't have a URL parameter, and that works. The way we got that to work is adding optional URL parameters. So whenever we have a URL parameter added to the product, /product, is going to take that and filter it for us and just bring back only women's clothing in this case, or if this was men's, as like this, it's going to return only men's clothing. So this is optional URL parameter we added, and you are going to learn how to do that also. But for now, we want to just focus on building only the product page, which is this, before we go and implement the optional URL parameter filtering. All right, first of all, we need to make queries to the API that gets us these data, and then we can implement them in our application. So let's head back to our code. What we need to do is, first of all, create a new file and call it utils.js, and this is where we can make our API calls and import it inside of our component. It's good you keep splitting your code wherever it is necessary for scalability and also to make your application robust. So if I go to my Postman, we want /product. This is the endpoint. We want to get all the product data. So we're just going to copy this, or let's just define a base URL variable here. So we'll say base URL is equal to, so since this is the base URL, we just want to add, we don't want to add any /. We can just inherit from, fix.api.com, just like this. And then whenever I want to make specific API calls to other endpoints, we can just add / extending from this base URL. So I hope that makes sense. So let's start with our product endpoint. So I'm just going to export const, and we're exporting because we're going to use it in our components, obviously. So we'll say fetch product is equal to async. So we'll be using Axios for our API calls, so it makes sense we import Axios first. So we'll say import Axios, just like this. And in here, we can make our API call. So const response is equal to await Axios.get. And then we can use our backticks. Dollar curly braces, call the base API URL, and that should be /product. As you can see from our Postman, we have fix.api /product. So that's the endpoint we need to get all the products. Again, we're getting this base URL from here, so we can use it in every other request we make. So this should be product. It should be product, just like this. And then we simply return response.data, just like this. All right. Now in our pages, let's create our product page. Again, I like to start with capital letter for our pages. So products.jsx, and then we can create our component const products is equal to, and then we can export default products, just like this. In here, we're going to return a div, just like this. So inside this div, we are going to map all our products and display them. But before we do that, we obviously need to get our product. So for that, we are going to use effect. So we want to get our product immediately the page loads. So for that, we are going to use effect. So import use effects, just like this. And then we'll call our use effect. And then we'll add our array dependencies. All right. So what I like doing is calling the entire function inside of the use effect, and rather than defining it outside and calling it inside the use effect. All right. So what I'm going to do now is say const get product async. This function is going to call this fetch product API we defined here, and it's going to get this data for us. So let's import this fetch product in our product page. So we say import fetch product, just like this. So in here, in the get product, so we can say const response again is equal to await, and then we simply await the fetch product, just like this. So this fetch product is going to get response.data for us. It's going to get all of the data from the API. If we go to our Postman, it's going to get all of this data. So back in our product.jsx file, we can simply create state variables to hold all of the data for the product. So let's just say const products, and then we can have a set products like this. And this should be equal to use state, and then we can initialize that as an empty array just like this. So with this, we can simply, set product should now be equal to response. Again, the response is coming back from our fetch product as response.data, so we don't need to do any response dot something here, because this response is going to be the array of all the products. All right, so that's everything we need for now. And then after we define the whole function, right below it we can just call it. And this is the point I was making. If I had defined this function outside, let me just show you my point. If I had defined this function outside the use effect, I would be forced to add the function to the dependencies if we want that to work properly, just like this. And if we do it like this, we are going to need to use a use callback or use memo for this to properly work. As you can see, we have a suggestion here, and you can also have a .catch method like this to catch any errors. You can also have a .catch error, catch. You can say console.error e. You can say, you can do something like this. We have an error, just like this. All right, so this works perfectly. And now in our return statement, we can map through all the products when they're existent. So with this div, we are going to give it a class name. We're going to give it a class name of product dash card dash cont, just like this. So product card container, and then inside of here we can define our map function. All right, so initially when our app loads, this is going to take a little bit of time to load. So we are going to first of all check if the product is not yet empty before we map. And the simple way we do that is to say products, and then we say and. Or you can even have something like if product.length greater than 0, just like this, and then we can make our query. So we can simply do product.map, and do product.map for each product. So we can see product Now, before we map all of our products, let's go back to our Postman and see the kind of data we have first of all. Now, if you look at it, we actually have even more data than needed. So we have category, we have a jewelry category. If I scroll down again, we have other categories like electronics. We don't need those. We only need the women's clothing and men's clothing specifically. So here we have to add a logic to filter out every other category and only return the men's and women's clothing category in this. So for that, inside of our arrow function, we can simply say product.category is not equal to jewelry and. So this is saying we don't want product category, we don't want any product with the category of jewelry, and we don't also want product with the category of electronics, just like this. So that's what this line of code is saying. If product.category is not jewelry and product.category is not electronics, return those for us, which are men's and women's clothing. All right, I hope that makes sense. This should be C, electronics. All right, and then we can add another and then here we can add our HTML. So if we go to our components folder, you can see we have a product card.jsx. This holds all the styling we have over here, so we don't have to create that from scratch. We already did that in our product card.jsx file, so we can just import that, pass the props to it, and it's going to display just like this for us. Back in our product.jsx file, let's import the product card. So import product card from product card. All right, so we can just copy that. In our return statement, after our condition, we can create a component just like this. This should be double equal, should double equal. All right, so here we are going to pass it all the props needed, as you can see here. First of all, let's pass id. See, id is equal to product dot id. And then what next? Rating and image. So we'll say rating product dot rating, and then the next one I think is image, so you can say product dot image. And then what do we have next? Category name, so we can just copy that. Category name product dot category, just like this. And then what's next? Product name should be product dot name. Let's just check to make sure. Oh, it's actually product dot title, not product dot name, my bad. So the product name from the API is product dot title. So what do we have next? Description and price. All right, description should be product dot description. All right, product dot description. And then we have price, product dot price. What is next? We also need a set cart items. Now if we scroll down, we need a set cart items that has some function inside of it. We are going to define that later. For now we can ignore that prop and run our app to see if it works. If we go back to the development version in our browser, let's first of all hit refresh, go to our product. We've not activated these links yet, but let's actually do it from the URL. Product, it's an S, and we forgot to actually add that to our routes, my bad there. So in our routes, let's add another route, and we can just copy and paste this, and then we can see / products, and then it's going to, first of all, let's import our product just like this, and then we can change this to products. If I refresh, you can see we have all of our products. Everything is working fine now. All right, that's it for this video. In the next lesson, we are going to change this import to lazy import, and then we will go back to our navbar and make all of these links work. So all of the links we have over here, we're going to make them work. When someone clicks on them, to take someone there. And then after that, we'll work on creating state variables for our entire application. Hello, my friends. Welcome to this lesson. In this lesson, we'll first of all make sure these navbar links are working properly. And then back in our route.js file, we want to import our product page using React Lazy. And again, what that simply means is that whenever our app loads, this product page is not going to load immediately. It's only going to load the home page, and that is good for performance. So every other page apart from the home page, we are going to import it using React Lazy. Like I said, that is going to improve the performance of our application. All right, so first, if we look at the development tab in our browser over here, we need to make this T-store take us back to the home page, and then the product page, and then the shop, and then the about. So let's head over to our navbar.jsx and change those. Over here, as you can see, we have the h2 tag that holds the T-store text. So since a link tag is just React Router's a tag that handles navigation, if we were to change this to a link tag, it's going to change the styling for us. So let's see what it looks like. You see, it changed the styling for us, and this is too small, right? So we want it to be big. So rather than actually making a CSS for this, we are just going to leave it at h2, and then we are going to use the use navigate function from React Router DOM to implement that. So first, let's import use navigate. Import use navigate from React Router DOM, and then in here we can initialize our navigation. Say const navigate is equal to use navigate, just like this. And then in our h2 tag that holds the T-store text, we can use an onClick to make that work. onClick. What am I writing? You can simply say navigate, and we want to navigate to the home page because that's what the T-store does. And let's test that out. Now we're in the product page. As you can see, if I click on T-store, it takes us back to the home page. Next, let's handle this product page link over here. So the product page is an a tag, which is perfect for using a link tag for our case. Let's import link from React Router DOM. So we can just add a comma next to our use navigate and call link, just like this. Then we can copy that and then change our a tag. The link tag doesn't use a href, it uses a to prop, so to, and then we can specify where we want this link to take us to, and that should be /products. All right, now let's hit that. We now have our product page and everything seems to be working fine. Now for our shop and about, we haven't implemented those for now, and also our cart and login, so we'll just leave the rest for now. But our T-store and product navigations both work, and then we'll handle the rest later. So next thing we're going to do is lazily import our product component over here in our routes.js file. Like I said, lazily importing components makes your application perform better, because those components are not going to load immediately, allowing for other important components to load immediately, like the home page, right? So first we need to import lazy from React, not React Router DOM. So import lazy, that should be from React, just like this. And then down here we can create that in a variable and say const product is equal to lazy, and this takes a callback function, so we're going to give it an arrow function, and in here we can simply import, call our import. We're just going to copy the path from our direct import above, so just copy it, and it's simply ./pages/product, just like this. The error we're having here is because we have the same identifier twice, so we can just remove this, and we have the product here and it's the same product here, so we can go back to our app and see if that works. We have an error, the component suspended while corresponding to asynchronous input. All right, the error we have is because we need to use the suspense component to render all of our routes. So in here we're going to import suspense from React, and this suspense, if you recall, is a React component that works with React Lazy. So whenever a component is lazily imported, this suspense is going to show a UI before that component finishes loading, and that's cool, so the user doesn't have to see a white page. So it's actually a good thing, and we definitely need it. So let's call the suspense. Like I said, we need to wrap our entire route inside of our suspense component. So I'm just going to cut the route and paste it in here. And it takes a fallback prop. The fallback prop is where we define what is going to be shown when the components are loading. So here we just want to return a h1 tag that says loading, just like this. So if you go back to the browser, you can see everything now works properly. If we go to our home page, go back to our product page. Now again, you might not see the use of this suspense because you probably won't be seeing the loading we added here. That's because our application hasn't gotten complex enough. When you have a very large application that makes a lot of API calls, a lot of data and stuff like that, this is definitely going to help you improve performance of the application. So just make sure you keep using this, and whenever it is necessary, you will be very good to go with it. All right, so now we've adjusted our navbar. The links now go to pages we want them, and then we've also imported our product page using React Lazy. That's it for this lesson, and I'll see you in the next one. Hello my friends, welcome back to this lesson. Now if you take a look at the finished version of the application over here, in the product page we have 3 links that handle filtering for us. So if we click on the women's, we should only see women's clothing, and if we click on men's, we should only see men's clothing, and if we click back to all, we should now see all of them together in one view. All right, that is what we are going to handle in this lesson. Let's go back to our product page. Inside of our pages folder, products.jsx, and that is where we are going to add that. First, we need to wrap everything inside of a container before we add that. So we are just going to create another div, and then we can wrap our card divs inside of here. Right above it, we are going to create our filter div. So we're just going to say div. Off the bat, the new container we created for all of it, we're just going to give it a class name of products-cont, which means products container. And then the filter div we are going to build now, we are just going to give it a class name of category select. So this div is going to hold, this div is basically the container for our category select functionality. All right, in here, if we go back to the finished version of the application, we can see we have all women's and men's. So we can just declare 3 span tags. You can say span multiply that into 3, and then we can just see all women's, and then we can add the last one, men's, over here. All right, now to actually make this work, whenever we click on them to filter the product for us, we need to add some actions, obviously. Now let's head back to the finished version of the application and think about how we'll do this. Now if we click on the men's, it filters only the men's clothing for us, but if we click back to all, it gives us every other clothing in one place. Now if we use a mere filter function to filter all of the array and then change the set product to the new filter method, if we were to click back on all, we wouldn't get back all of the data except we make a new API call. Because think about it, if filtering to women's and then we set product to only the women's, the only data we will now have is going to be only the women's object. The rest of the data will be gone because that's what a filter method does. It only returns back an array based on some logic. So for that reason, we need a place to store all of the data in one place that will not change, right? So what we'll do, we can say const all products, and then we'll say set all products, and then this can be a use state, square bracket. Again, if you don't understand this, it's quite straightforward and you see the use now. So here, where we are calling the API, we can just add the products. We can just set all products and then add the products here. All right, now we can define our filter method. It seems like we need to add an array dependency. We need products. I don't know why we need products actually. Oh, it should be response, not products. All right, so now we can declare our filter method. Above our use effects, we can just say const filter products. What am I typing? Products, and this should be so, and this is going to be an arrow function, and then we can say const. So let's actually rename this to handle filter products. I think it's a good conventional way of doing it. Const filter products, and then we can say filter products is equal to, now with this filter products we can use our all products here. So whenever we use our all products, we can now change the set product. That way we don't change our all products, and our all products can stay and have all of the combined data. I hope that makes sense. So we can say all products, then we can say filter, then we can say product, and then we want to return, and then we want to return the product, and then we want to return the product, and this should be product, the products. We want to return the product dot category is equal to product category, just like this. So we need this product category to work. So whenever we click on each of them, the product category should either be men's or women's, and if the user clicks back on all, we just want to return all of the array to the set product. So here, this needs a parameter of product category. So we are just going to pass it to the handle filter product. So it's going to take a parameter of the product category we want, and then we can now set products to be our filter products, just like this. All right, I hope this makes sense. And so here, now inside of these span tags, we can now use onClick methods to activate that. As you can see, this is how it's spelled out, men's clothing. Yes, we should see women's clothing. So this is how they are both spelled out. So now what we'll do is we'll go back to our route.js file, and then we'll create variables for them, like constant variables for them, which we'll use to identify them rather than typing them out everywhere in our code. Because in the future, we'll still need to use those variables. So we can just say export const, and so this is going to be equal to an object. And so here we can just say men's, and then so we'll say men's like this, clothing. I'm sure this is how it is in the API. All right, and then we can just copy and paste this, turn this to women's, and then we can just add women's here. Now in our product page, we can simply import that. Import allowed categories. Now in this span, we can add an on-click for our women's, and then we declare our arrow function, and then we can call our handle filter method, handle filter products, and this is going to take a value of allowed categories dot women's, just like this. And then we can copy this entire on-click event, add it to our men's span tag, and then we can remove the WO over here. All right, let's go over to our code and actually test this out. So I'm just going to head to the production version, which is this. You can see it looks squashed and it actually doesn't work. So we're just going to go back, refresh our page. As you can see, it works. So you can see the styling is not quite there, it's bad, but let's actually click on these and see if they work. So if I click on the men's, it did actually work, but nothing changed apparently. Let's click back on the women's. As you can see, we now have women's clothing that changes immediately. Now let's click back on the men's. As you can see, we now have every other clothing from the men's category. Right, this seems to be working perfectly. Now let's go back and adjust the styling of these span tags. All right, back in our page, we can just add class names to them. You can say class name is equal to select dash cat dash span, just like this. And this is the class name we'll give all of them. So we'll just copy, paste in our women's, copy, paste in our men's, and let's format our code. All right, if I go back, as you can see, it looks perfect. So if you click on the women's again, we only have the women's clothing. If we click on the men's, we only have the men's clothing. All right, if we click on all, you can see it doesn't work. It's supposed to give us both of the categories in one place. So the all doesn't work, and now we are going to get that to work. All right, let's head back to our code and add an on-click event to our all. So how do we do this? So in our handle filter, we take a category. We want to filter based on that category. But when we want to go back to all, we need to find a way to make all of this come back, right? What we can do is initialize our parameter to be null. And then we can use an if statement and say whenever this category is null, we just want to return it back to what it used to be, right? So in here, we can just say if product category. So if product category is available, which means if product category is not null, that is the only time we want to run this piece of code. And then we can use an else statement here. Else, we just want to set the product. We want to set the product to all products. Again, the all products never changes. We only filter it here and use the data returned to set our product. So whenever the else statement runs, the set product is going to go back to all of our products, right? So inside of our all span tag, we can call our on-click event, and here we can simply call our handle filter, just like this. Since we are not passing any parameters to it, the default null is going to call and activate our else statement. Let's go back to our browser and see if that works. I'm just going to hit the refresh. So the default state is obviously all of the categories. Now, if I click on women's, we now have only the women's category. If I click back on all, we should now have all of the categories. Let's click men's, still works. Women's still works. And then all still works. All right, that's perfect. I hope that wasn't too confusing for you guys. So the last thing we need to do before we move on to the next lesson. Now let's go back to the finished version and see. In the finished version, you can see whenever a category is active, the color is changed over here. So when we're on men's, the color is changed. When we're on women's, the color is changed. When we're in all, the color is changed. So we need to add a state variable for that and the CSS property for it as well. So back in our product.jsx file, we need to create another state and check which one is active. So we can say const. We'll just call it active cat, which is short form for active category. And then we can say set active cat. And then we can say use state, and we are going to set the default to all, right? Since in the beginning it's going to be all. This should be use state, not use effect. So now we are going to make use of this to check which category is active, and then we will change the CSS for it accordingly. Okay, so what we want to do is, if the active category is all, the CSS property will change to make that color purple that we have, and if the active category is women's, the CSS is going to change, and so on and so forth. So the first thing we're going to do is make our class name dynamic to check which value our state variable is. So that means we're going to turn this into curly braces, and we're going to make use of backticks so we can use state values inside of our class names. All right, so first of all, for the all, we want to check, so we can say dollar curly braces. We want to check if active, cat is equal to all, then we can call the CSS property we need, and if not, we just want to return an empty string. So the CSS property to make this purple, which is what we have over here, if we click on them, it's kind of like, it's kind of like purple. I don't know. For that CSS property, we just need to add the class name of cat-active. So this means whenever the active cat is equal to all, the CSS property cat-active is going to activate, which is going to turn this to purple. Else, it's going to be an empty string and turn it back to whatever it used to be, which is black or gray in this case. Now we'll just copy this and paste it in every other span tag we have. We'll just change the class name over here, paste it, and then we can change this to women's like this. And for our men's, we can also replace the class name and change this to men's. Now to change our active cat state variable, we can call them inside of each onClick event. So in here, let's start with our all. We'll just add curly braces here, and then below our handle filter product, we can just say set active cat, and then we'll set it back to all, just like this, right? So whenever all is clicked, it's going to set active cat back to all, which is going to activate our CSS class over here. Then we can just copy, so we can just copy this and add it everywhere else in our code. In our handle click of the women's, add curly braces, and then we paste it here, change the all to what we have above, which is women's, and then we can also do the same, and then we can also do the same for our men's. First of all, use curly braces, and then below our handle filter products, we can change this to men's, just like that. So again, the default is all, so whenever it loads, all is going to be the one that has the CSS active class, which is going to make it purple, and then we can click on every other one, and that is going to work. Now let's head back to our browser and test that out. Let's first of all reload the page. You can see we have all active here, and if we click on women's is active. If we click on men's is active. All right, that's it for this lesson, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now. In this lesson, we are going to implement optional URL parameters for our product page path. So if we head back to the finished version of this app and we go to the home page, so this is the finished version, you can see that below we have categories. We have a category section, and if we click on one of these categories, let's say women's, so this is the same page as the product page, but we're adding an optional URL parameter to achieve this. And below you can see we only have the women's clothes over here, and there's no other option such as all men's, only the women's clothing. All right, so we're going to see how to add optional URL parameters, and then we'll update this to adjust with that as well. So back in our code, we can just go to our route.js and add the URL parameter over here. So the way we add URL parameters, if you recall, is we just add a /, we add a column. This column is going to indicate that we want a URL parameter from our application. So column, and then we want the category. So to make this optional, we add a question mark at the end of it. Without this question mark, this URL parameter must have a category. So if it was just like this, the /product alone will not be able to work again. Let's see that for ourselves. So in our development environment here, if I refresh and I do /product, you can see we have a blank page because it expects another parameter over here. So we can just say HHH, and now it works. So that's the problem. We can't have the product page alone again, except we make the URL parameter optional. So if we add a question mark here and we go to /product, you can see it still works as fine as it does. All right, so that's the use of adding optional URL parameters. Without making it optional, this path must have the URL parameter specified here. So again, you can actually, declare another path. If you want to do it, you can declare another path and make this take categories, and this is going to work also. But I wanted to show you guys how to work with optional URL parameters in your application. All right, now back to our product page, we are going to use a hook from React Router DOM called useParams, which is going to help us grab the URL parameter we impute. So we'll just say import useParams from React Router DOM, just like that. So from our useParams, we want to extract category is equal to useParams. So we are just destructuring here. So what we're extracting, the value we're extracting has to be exactly the same as the parameter we added in our route.js file here. So that value has to be absolutely the same as this in order for that to work. That being said, the API we're using has a category endpoint which allows us to get only data from a specific category. So I'm just going to say export const fetch category items, or let's just go with products to be consistent, and then is equal to, this should be an async function, and it's going to take a parameter of the required category. So we can just say category, just like this, and then we can do const response is equal to await. Then we can call our axios dot get, and then the URL parameter we want to get. So back in our Postman, I have the URL path here to get a specific category. So it's our base URL /product /category, and then / the name of the category we want. Let's see how that works. So we can use backticks again, and then we'll call our base URL. Our base URL is only, fakestore.api.com, and now we can add /product, should be small letter, products, and then / what do we have again? Category, and then now we can add / the category we want, which is going to be this category parameter of our function. So I'm just going to copy that, and then we can do like this. Let's turn this to underscore category so it doesn't confuse us too much. Then we'll just underscore category, just like that. So this is the URL path, and then we can just simply return response.data, just like we did above here. All right, now back in our product.js file, we want to import that as well. Since they're in the same folder as our fetch products, we can just add a comma here, and I think we name that fetch products category, fetch category product, just like this. Fetch category product, just like this. Now again, inside of our use effect, we can just call the same function, right? But since this is an optional parameter, we can't simply call it inside of our use effect. In the case where we're in the /product alone, just like this, it will never be able to get called. So that is going to throw an error if we called it in a use effect. For that case, inside of our use effect, we are going to use a condition to check if this category exists. If it does, it should just get a specific category. Let's see how that works. So first we'll say if category. Again, if the optional parameter is provided, that is the only time this category is going to be existent. So we can just copy this whole function over here and put it inside of the if statement. So we're only going to get all of the products. Oh, if category doesn't exist, sorry. We're only going to get all of the products if the category doesn't exist. So we have if not category, that is the only time we want to work with all of the products. Else, we want to work with specific category endpoint. So again, I can just copy this code over here and then modify it. We can just say get category product. Instead of fetch product, we can just change this to fetch category product. Now we can actually remove this all product since we don't need it We only needed it because we wanted to filter between men's clothing, women's clothing, and all of the other clothing in the normal state. Now back in our browser, whenever we were in a specific category like the men's category, we don't need that filter functionality here because this is returning only one category, right? So over here we can remove this all products set state, can remove it over here, and we just need the product here. Now this is going to need an array dependency, which is our category, and then can paste that in here, and then at the end we should just call our function just like we did here. Perfect. Let's also add the same catch method like this, and that should be okay. Okay, I hope that wasn't too confusing for you guys. We actually still need to add more logic to our product page to make everything work perfectly. Now let's head back to the finished version of the app. The filter component we have here only has the men's clothing value. If we go to products, we have all women's and men's, but if we go to a specific category, again you can see we only have one category, so we need to add the logic to only display this when we have just a single category, and that's pretty easy. Inside of our category select over here, let's just close it down, and then we can add logic to it. So we can say if not category, again we only want to have all of these filter methods we have here if the category is not existent, because if the category is existent, we're only working with one category. I hope that makes sense. So we can say if not category, add our question mark. This is a ternary expression, as you know. So if the category doesn't exist, this will show up, and if there is a category, we just want to declare a div. We'll still give it the class name of our container, which is where is it? Yeah, category select. We still want to use the same container, and then we paste it in here, and then we basically want a span tag. We want a span tag that has the name of the category, so we can just do like this, and then we can say category, just like that. So whenever we have a specific category, this is what is going to show up. If not, we can have the filter methods we used previously. Let's test that out. So this is the finished version of the application. Let's head to the production version. I'm just going to refresh, and we are going to do this manually because we haven't added links to make this work. So let's first of all do it manually before we add those links. So we go to products first. Now we have all of our products. It's working perfectly. You can filter women's, men's, back to all, and everything works just perfectly. Now we need to add an optional parameter. You have to go /product/. Now back in our postman, so you guys don't get confused, we need to write it exactly the way it is like this. So we'll just paste it over here, and if we hit enter, or something seems to be wrong, let's check for ourselves. Oh, the problem we're having is because we didn't add the category parameter we needed here, so that's a bad mistake. So we just need to add category over here, and that should be all. If I go back to our browser, as you can see, we only have the women's category over here, and this works perfectly fine. Let's actually add the class for the active. Let's just add the active class here, so we can just say class name, and then we can give it cat-active, just like that. As you can see, it's back the way we need it to be. So this is how we work with optional URL parameters. Is we are going to add these links to go to the product page with the appropriate category. So back in our component, we have the category card.jsx, and this is where that is going to take place. All right, here we have a button, and this is the button that is going to work, the button that holds the title. So here we can add an on-click event, and inside of our on-click event, we can use the use navigate parameter. So first, let's import it from React Router DOM. Import use navigate, do not use event, navigate, and then again we can initialize it. Const navigate is equal to use navigate, just like this. And then in our on-click event, we can simply navigate to the page we want. All right, so since this is going to be either men's or women's, we need to check which one it is and navigate to the appropriate page. So first we are going to use our backticks, and then first we want to go to /products. So we're going to use dollar curly braces and the name of the category we want. So the category is going to come from this title, and we need to check what the title is, and then we'll know which category we want to, navigate to. All right. So that means we're just going to say title. If title is equal to women's, just like this, had a question mark. If the title is equal to women's, we are going to do women's clothing as we have in our postman here. Again, rather than imputing it here directly, we already declared it over here. In our allowed categories, we have men's and women's, which have the appropriate text for what we want. So let's import that. So we can just say import allowed category. Let's remove this. And then if the title is women's, the parameter will be allowed category dot women, else it will simply be allowed category dot men's. Again, the reason why we are using these dynamic values is because we've already correctly written it the way we want the URL parameter to be, and so this should now work. Head back to our browser and see if that works. If I refresh the page, let's first of all click on men's, navigate / men's clothing, and as you can see that works. Go back, click on women's, navigate, and then we have the women's clothing. All right, my friends, thank you so much for watching this lesson, and I'll see you in future ones. Bye for now. Hello guys, welcome back to this lesson. In this lesson, we are going to be implementing a cool dynamic navigation functionality. So let me just show it to you. This is the finished version of the application. Within the nav bar, if I click on this shop, see what it does. You can see it first of all takes us to the home page, and then it automatically scrolls down here. Now let's try that again. Back to the product page. If I click shop, it goes to the home page and then it scrolls down. This is a cool navigation effect that we are going to do in this lesson. All right, back in our code, in our home.jsx file, we want to navigate to this categories container over here, this categories section, which is this div with the class name of cat_cont. And back in our browser, you can see it here. Again, if I click on the shop, you see we're inside of this viewport of our category container. All right. So obviously the way we can do that is by using useRef, and then we can use the reference to this container or this section, and then we can kind of scroll down to that place. All right. Now in order to do that, since this is our navbar, we need to give our navbar access to the reference of this category container over here. So back in our code, you can see in our app.js, you can see our navbar component is called over here. We need to be able to pass a prop to our navbar and also our home component for those two components to be able to communicate. So first of all, let's go back to our home.jsx file, and then we are going to add the ref prop we need to go to that viewport. So we're just going to add the ref, and this ref, since the action is occurring from our navbar, we need to add a prop to our home page component so we can communicate with our navbar back in our app.js, where we have the navbar and also our home page from the route map over here. I hope that makes sense, and you'll see shortly why that is necessary. So here we're just going to call this, let's just say category ref, and then we'll just put that here. So this category ref is the same one we are going to pass to our home page, and then we'll pass it to our navbar, so our navbar will have access to this ref property and execute the functionality we want. So in our navbar also, we are going to make use of our category ref, and then we can just say comma category ref, just like this. Okay, as you can see over here, our shop button is actually a span tag, right? The reason why we are not going to use a link tag is because we don't only want to navigate to the home page, we want to navigate there, and then we also want to scroll. So we actually need to define a function to do that. So what we'll do is say const handle navigate scroll. That is going to be equal to an arrow function, and then in here we are going to handle that functionality of navigating to the home page and then scrolling back down. So let's use the navigate variable already defined over here. So we can just say navigate, and then we can do navigate /. This simply is going to navigate us back to the home page. Now let's see how this works first, and then we will implement the scroll functionality. Let's find our shop, and then inside of our span tag, we can just use an on click, and then we can call the navigate scroll over here. Let's refresh. And then if we click on our product page and then we click on shop, we now go back to the home page. Now we need to implement the functionality to not just go back to the home page, but actually scroll back down where we have the categories, right? All right. So basically we can do that by doing something like category ref dot current dot scroll into view, and then we can set the behavior. Then we can set the behavior to smooth, just like this. But this wouldn't work, and I'll tell you why. But let's actually see for ourselves. Back in our code, if we go to another page like the product page and we refresh, and then let's click on shop, you can see we have an error, property undefined. This error is because back in our app.js file, we haven't given our navbar and our home component those props. So this is where we are going to define our ref. So here we can say const category ref is equal to use ref. We actually need to import use ref here, so we can do import use ref from React. Then you can simply use it over here, use ref, and then we initialize that to null. So we have our category ref over here and we initialize it to null. So inside of our navbar, we just need to pass the category ref as category ref, which is this one we declared here. In our route.component, inside of our element prop, we can add any prop any page needs over here. So as you can see, we already have a suggestion for the category ref which the home page needs. What this does is whichever component needs the prop, it's going to pass it to it, and whichever component doesn't need it, it will just ignore it, right? So here we have category ref, and then you can just use the category ref, and this obviously comes from our use ref over here, right? So adding this is going to give our home page the category ref, and over here in our navbar the category ref. So both of the components we want to manipulate have access to that same ref. All right, let's head back to our browser. Let's refresh. We go to the products page first, and then we click on shop. Scroll into view seems to be null. Let's see, that should be in our navbar component. I think we should add a question mark after the current here, since the current might or might not be when the page loads. So we can also go back and test that again. Click on shop. Yeah, all right, it works perfectly fine now. Okay, so what I was saying is the reason why we don't have any scroll effect now when we actually do it. Let's try it again. So we're on the product page and we click on the shop. We don't actually get the scroll effect we want. The reason for that is because immediately it navigates, this whole function finishes running, because the time it takes to switch from one page to another, the function is done running and this is disregarded. So what we can do is we can set timeout, allow the navigation to work, and then after that timeout, this is going to work, right? So in here, we can basically set a timeout, and then we can just set this to 300 milliseconds. And then inside of our timeout function, we can cut this and paste it in here, just like this. Now the function is going to execute and the navigation is going to work, but this is going to be halted for 300 milliseconds. During that time, the navigation should be complete, and then this is going to run and do our scroll effect for us. Let's try that out. We go back to the product page, let's refresh, and let's hit shop. As you can see, it works exactly the way we want it to. This is a really cool effect and I like it. So that's what I wanted to show you guys, how to do, dynamic navigation, add animations to your navigations, which React Router DOM allows you to do. All right, that's it for this lesson, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now. Hello my friends, welcome back. In this lesson, we are going to start building the cart page. Now, if we go to the finished version of this app, let's refresh our product page and let's add items to cart over here. And then back in our navbar, we have this cart icon. If you click on it, we now have our cart page. As you can see, we have all the items we just added, and then the total, and then also a checkout button. So this cart page is what we are going to build. So back in our code, we'll first of all add this functionality to add cart items, and then build an array of all the cart items we have. So back in our code, what we need to do is, first of all, we need to go to our app.js, and then define the state variable for our cart items. So that means we just need to add a const cart items, and then we can set cart items just like this, use state. Instead of initializing this to be an empty array, let's just define the initial state of our cart items and see the kind of data we need for that. So we can say const cart initial state, not start, and that should be an object. And then first we need the total amount, which is going to be 0, and then number of items, which is going to be 0. This is a comma, not a dot. After the number of items, then we want all the cart items lastly, and then it should be an empty array. So here we just initialize our cart items to be our cart initial state, just like this. Now inside of our pages, let's create a new file, call it cart.jsx. Again, I like to start with a capital letter for my pages, and then we hit enter, and let's go to our route and add the route to it. So we can just copy this, paste it in here, and then we can change this to cart, and then we can also change this, but let's create the component first. So here we can just do const cart is equal to an arrow function, and in here we can return a div just like this, and then we can export default our cart, not cart, just like this. And then in our route.js file, we simply import our cart items using lazy. This is supposed to be in our utils file, so I'm just going to cut it. You can basically leave yours here, but I'm just going to cut it. Sorry for that mistake. It should be in our utils file. I'm going to paste it here. You can leave yours there, but I don't think that's where it belongs, so that's why I changed it. All right, so now we should import our cart page component. So we are going to lazy import it just like we did for our products, since it's not our home page, which is the only component we want to, kind of load immediately our application is opened. So we can say const cart is equal to lazy, and that should be equal to import, and then here we can do ./pages and /cart, just like this, and then we can change this to our cart. Oh sorry, should be the name of our component. Back in our cart page, let's just return a hello, and if we head to our browser, we now have errors for the import of the allowed categories. I'm sure a lot of you are going to have that error, so let's just leave that there rather than trying to fix it. I'll just go back to our utils, cut it, and then in our route we'll just keep it there. That's no problem. All right, so if we go to /cart, we now have the hello from our cart page. All right, now we are going to build out our cart page. So now we are going to build out our cart page, and all I need you guys to do for now is to code along with me. All right, the first div should have a class name of cart cont, and then we also have a wrapper div that will replace our hello. Say div dot cart wrapper. So div with a class name of cart wrapper, and then in here we can get our cart items. So our cart page needs all of the cart items we have, so that's going to take a prop of cart items, and then we can map our cart items inside of our cart wrapper. So in here we can simply do cart items. So we need to check if the cart items actually has items inside of it, so we don't get an error. So back in our app.js, the cart items we are looking for is in our cart items property over here. So that will be cart items dot cart items, right? And we want to make sure that is not empty before we map our cart. So in here we'll just say cart items dot cart items let's just say this is an underscore cart item so it doesn't confuse you guys. So we have underscore cart items. So the cart items dot cart items, and this is the, you know, this cart items array over here. So if this is not empty, that is when we want to call this map function. So we can do dot length is greater than 0, and then we can do and underscore cart items dot cart items, and then here we can map dot map, and this is going to be item, and then in here we can call the return statement, and then we return our JSX. So here we're going to return a div. Here we're going to return a div, and the div is going to have a class name of cart list count, just like this. And obviously we need to give it a key property. Key is going to be equal to item.id, just like this. The first property we need to give it is the image. So over here we just declare an image tag, and the source is going to be item.img, and the alt tag is going to be, we're going to call this item.product name. So these are values from our cart items we are going to need. So after our image file, we need to add a container that has an ID of cart text. So this is not a class name, we just give it an ID, not a class name. Inside the container we add our button, which is going to have the class name of free shipping, and after the button, inside of the same container we can have a h2 with the class name of cart item dash h2, just like this. And then inside of our h2 tag we are going to pass the product name, just like this. And then next we need a h3 tag. h3, we're going to have a class name of cart item dash h3, and then we're just going to pass the item dot price dot to fixed to. So this is going to turn our price into 2 decimal places rather than a bunch of numbers. All right, next we're going to add a h1 tag. You can go h1. We're going to have a class name of cart item, as you have guessed, h1, and then this is going to have a value. You're going to have a value of item dot price times 1.2. Before the price items, let's add a dollar. So we add a dollar for this h1, and the h3 right above it we add a dollar sign over here too. And then lastly we have a h4 that has a class name of cart item h4, as you might guess. And then inside of here we need a logic. All right, the description for each item is usually long, so we need to cut it short. So the way we do that is we simply do item.description, then we check if the length is greater than 200 characters. If that is true, then we use our backticks, dollar curly braces. So if that is true, we want to reduce the item description to only 200 characters. So we basically do item.description, then we use the substring method of JavaScript .substring, and then we want the first character all the way up to the 200th character. And then right after that we are going to add 3 dots to make it look like there is more to the description. And if that is not the case, then this is our else statement. We want to pass this entire description. So what this logic means is, if the description of an item is more than 200 characters, we want to cut it short to only be 200 characters. If not, that means if it's shorter than 200 characters, just pass it to us. All right, I think that's pretty straightforward. So now if we head back to our browser, you can see we have an error that says cart items is undefined. That's because we haven't passed that prop in our app.js file. So in our app.js file, inside of our route.component, after our category ref, we can just simply call the underscore cart items over here, and that should be equal to our cart items. So the prop name is underscore cart items, and then we pass it this state variable of cart items over here. Now head back to our browser. We have no errors, but now you can see we have a blank page. That's because we have no items in our cart items, and we added the logic to only render. Let's go back to our cart.jsx file, and we add the logic to only render this if the cart item is not empty. So what happens if the cart item is empty? We can't just leave out a blank page over here, right? We need to add something or tell the user something that they haven't added any items to cart, and that's exactly what we are going to do. All right, so instead of this and we'll just use the ternary expression. If the cart item.length is not 0, this is going to execute, and then we need to add an else statement now, and that else statement is going to come right after this closing parenthesis, because that's where it ends, and then we'll put a column. That's an else, and then in here we just want to return a h1. We just want to return a h1 that says you haven't added any items to cart. So if the user doesn't have any item in cart, we want to show them you haven't added any items to cart. Let's go back. You can see we now have it here. You haven't added any items to cart. Now in the next lesson, we are going to actually handle adding items to cart from our product page. So whenever you click on this add to cart, we want to add items to cart, and if we click on this button, it should take us to the cart page, and the cart page should now show us all the items we have inside of it. Hello my friends, welcome to this lesson. In this lesson, we are going to implement adding a functionality to add items to cart. So back in our product page, we want to be able to click this add to cart and add items to cart. As you can see, if we click on it, we have set cart items, not a function. All right, so back in our code, that's actually coming from our product cart.jsx component. As you can see, we've already implemented the set cart items function over here to add items to cart. So we have a total amount which takes the initial state and then adds whatever the total amount used to be with the new price, and then it does the same for number of items. It just adds 1, and then adding items to cart uses spread operation, takes the initial state and then adds the new item to cart. I think this is pretty straightforward over here. Now the only thing we need to do is to add the set items to the prop. Now back in our product.jsx page, we need to add the set item. We need to add the set cart items over here, and that should come from our app.js. So in our app.js, we have the set cart items over here, which means we need to pass it as a prop. So first of all, let's add that as the product prop first. So product.jsx file, we just add the set cart items prop. So we have set cart items, just like this, and then we come back to our product card over here, and then we set the cart items to set cart items, just like this. So we head back to our app.js, and then we add that to our props. So we have set cart items, and that should be set cart items, just like this. So if we head back to our code and then we refresh, if we add item to cart, add item to cart, add item to cart, and then we go to our cart page, you can see we still have you haven't added any items to cart. That's because we are doing it from the URL, and whenever we go to a page or route from our URL, our entire application reloads. So that's one big use case of navigation. Navigation doesn't refresh our application and the state remains the way it used to be. We needed to add a use navigate or a link component to link us to the other page from this button over here. So this cart button over here in our navbar is what we are going to use to achieve that. So we simply need to go to our navbar.jsx file, and then we find that it's this A tag you are seeing over here with the cart item count class name, and then we just change that to a link component, just like this, and we pass the prop to it to take us to /cart. Now also, if we go to the finished version of our application, you can see we have the number of items in the cart over here in our cart icon in the nav bar. But in our development version, we don't have that, and we actually just have a red dash up here. So let's actually fix that first. So that is supposed to be our cart items count, which is a prop of our navbar, and we haven't added that. So back in our app.js, we just need to add that in our navbar component over here. You can see cart, you can see we have a suggestion, cart items count, and that should be our cart items, cart items dot number of items, because that's the item count we need. Now if we head back to our browser, as you can see, we have the 0 over here, right? Now let's actually refresh, go to our product page, and then add items to cart. If I add 2 items to cart, you can see we have 2 items over here. Let's add the third one. It has changed to 3. And now if I click on the cart button or icon over here, it takes us to the cart page, and we have our cart items. But as you can see, it's kind of botched and everything looks kind of scrappy, and so let's fix that. Back in our cart page, cart.jsx page, and we just need to fix a few things. In our image tag over here, we just need to give it a class name of cart-img, just like this. We head back to our browser, and you can see we have a well formatted cart page. Now in the finished version of this application, we have another card over here that summarizes our purchases for us, the shipping cost, the total items, and we also have the checkout button. Let's add that to our cart page. All right, after this cart wrapper we have over here, which is the second to the last closing div, we create a space in between the second to the last and the last closing div, and this is where we are going to create this component over here. Now I just need you to code along with me again. So we have a div with the class name of cart summary dash count. So a div with the class name of cart summary container, just like this, and then inside we have a h2 tag with the class name. It actually doesn't have a class name, so we're just going to remove that. We have a h2 tag, the value of total, and then column, and then our dollar, curly braces. This dollar is actually not for a ternary expression. This dollar, we need it in a symbol as the USD dollar sign for the price. So dollar, then we open our curly braces to use a variable, and this variable is going to come from our cart items dot total, the total amount dot to fixed to. Oh, this is actually underscore cart items, not cart items, like this. And then after that, we need a h5 tag, and then which has a value of shipping cost, and then column, and then we have $0. This is not going to take any state variable. We're just going to set it to a default value of $0. All right, next we have another h5 for total items, and that is going to come from our underscore cart items dot number of items, just like this. So we need to close that. And then last but not the least, we need our button tag. This is going to take a default styling, not a class name, so we're just going to give it a style of align self. That should be center, and then comma, we're going to add a width. The button is going to need a width of 100%, just like this. So the value is going to be checkout, and eventually we are going to add an on-click event that is going to navigate the user to the checkout page whenever this button is clicked. But for now, we can make use of this. If I head back to the browser, I refresh, you can see we have no items. If I refresh, you see we don't have any items because the state has reset. but we still do have this total over here. I think we should remove this whenever there's no item in the cart. So we can just simply go back and add a logic here again and say underscore cart items dot cart items. So that means if the cart items, and then we can simply do dot length, just like we did before, is greater than 0. So if the length is greater than 0, that is when we want this to show. So we can just add the AND operator here, and. So we cut this whole div and put that inside of here, just like this. So if I head back to our code, if I refresh, you can see we no longer have that whenever our cart is empty. Now let's actually add items to cart and see if it appears. We're going to add just 3 random items. Let's make it 4, and then we can go to our cart page. You can see we have a total of $155, 4 items and 0 shipping cost, and these are all of the items we have. You see we have this long number after the decimal point, and that was what we're always avoiding using the toFixed function from JavaScript. So let's go to our cart.jsx file and find that. So inside here, let's find the price toFix the 0.2. We actually added that, but we still got the error. Where is this coming from? Oh, we needed to add it to this price over here also. So we can just put this inside of brackets like this, and then outside that we can do toFixed and then set that to 2, just like this. If we head back, we now have well formatted pricing. All right, that's cool. But first of all, we actually do have an error over here. This value is supposed to be the value of this. Since this is a discounted value, we made a mistake. Sorry about that. We can just head back, copy this, paste it over here, copy this, and fix this just like this. So this is where it's supposed to be. This is the original value and this is the discounted value. That was a mistake. All right, so in the next lesson we are going to build the checkout page. So whenever we click on this checkout button, it actually takes us there, and then we can work with that. All right, see you in that lesson. Bye for now. All right, my friends, welcome back. In this lesson we are going to create the checkout page. So if we head back to the browser and look at the finished version of our app, if we go to the cart page and we try to head to the checkout page from this button over here, you can see that we need to log in, which means this is a protected route. So let's get one of the data from Fixstore API. So we are using the data from there. So we'll simply do /users like this, and this will return a list of user data for us, which we can use even for authentication. As you can see, we have an email and a password here. So let's just copy the first one. This is the password, then set the password, and then the email. So this is actually an email input, not a username. It was a mistake. So email, if I hit submit, it should load. And if that works, we can now go to the cart page, go to checkout, and now the checkout page works perfectly. So the checkout page is a protected route, which means the user needs to be authenticated for them to be able to access the checkout page and check out. All right, so let's head back to our code and build the checkout page for ourselves. So first of all, create a new file and call it checkout.jsx, and then we can create our component const checkout. Should be an arrow function. Export default. Checkout just like this, and then in here we can return a div. Just like this. All right, so our checkout page, as you can see over here, we need the user data and also data for the cart items or the user's purchased items, right? So we'll just go over here, add those to our props. We need the user and then the cart items as our checkout page props. All right, now let's actually just code out our HTML, and then we'll head over to handling the state variables. So just code along with me here. In here, you can simply create a h1 tag that says checkout, and then below. So first of all the data you are seeing over here, we definitely need to make sure the user data is passed and also the cart item data is passed. So we need to make that check before building out this component, and that means inside of our curly braces we need to check if user and cart items So we need both of them, and then can do like this. And then in here we can add our logic for if the cart items and user exists, then we'll return a div over here. If that doesn't exist, and in here we're just going to add no items. So the reason why we're going to add no items is because it's possible we might have a user but we don't have any items in our cart. So that's the only time this is going to work. But if the user is not authenticated, we are not going to be able to see this page in the first place. So that's why we're just going to say no items over here. And then in here, inside of our div, inside of this middle div over here, let's first of all give it a class name of cart dash summary dash cont, cart summary cont. And then this is our container, and then we create a h2 tag. Again, we give it a total, and then we can add our dollar, then our curly braces, and in here we can cart items dot total amount. Now this is exactly what we did in our cart page over here. So we can basically just paste it from this h5 upwards, from the h5 to the h2, and then we go back to our checkout page, and then we just simply replace this, paste it in, right? So this is cart, not underscore cart. Or might as well use underscore cart, but we're just going to leave it like this. All right. We can add one for our shipping address. So we have h5, and then the value is going to be shipping address. And in here we can declare another span tag and give it a class name of text purple. Should be text dash purple. And then the value is going to come from our user object. So we have a value from our user object from user.address.city, and you can find that if you go to our Postman, you can see in our user object we have user.address.city. You have the city of the user, and we also need the street from the same data. So after that, right in front of that, we open another curly braces, and then we do user.address.street this time around. That's it for that. And after that h5, we create another h5 for our billing address. We create another h5, and this one is going to be biller, which is the user, and then this is going to be user.name.first name, like this. And again, if you go back to the Postman, the API has user.name.firstname and then also user.name.lastname, which is what we'll do. So we'll just copy this over, come to this place, then we'll change this first to last, just like this. And then lastly, after our h5 tag, we can now have our button that says pay now. And this button is going to have a custom style, so we'll give it a style. You can say align self is equal to center, like this, and also width will be 100%. All right, so this is everything we need for our checkout page. Now let's go to our route.js and add it to our routes. We just need to create another route over here, and then we can make this checkout. And let's lazily import our checkout page. So we can copy our cart, and then we modify it and say checkout, and this will be pages / checkout, just like this. And then we can just copy this over below, just do this. So obviously our checkout page requires auth. We'll change this to true, and then in the next lesson we'll actually implement the logic to check routes that are guarded and only display them when the user is authenticated. But for now, we can just turn this to true. Since we haven't added any logic over here, we should still be able to access the protected routes, but in the next video we'll actually make them protected. Now let's head back to our browser and see if the checkout page has been built properly. So back in our browser, this is the finished version of the project. If I head to the development version, actually we haven't added link to this. If I go to /checkout, I hit enter. So as you can see, we initially have checkout no items. Now that we've created our checkout page HTML, in the next lesson, we'll pass this data to it and add logic to make it a protected route. I'll see you there. All right, my friends, welcome to this lesson. In this lesson, we are going to be creating the authentication functionality. If you recall, in our previous lesson, we created the checkout page, which is still empty, but we want this checkout page to be a protected route, right? We want the user to only be able to access the checkout page only if the user is authenticated. So that's exactly what we're going to do in this lesson. We're going to create a login page and create the login functionality. So back in our pages folder, we just define login.jsx. So we can just do const login should be equal to an arrow function, and then we can export default login just like this. In here, we can return a form tag. So for this login component, we want to build a simple login functionality, right? So I just need you guys to code along with me. So in the first form tag we created, we just give it a class name. I'll give it a class name of login-form. And then we call a span tag and give it a class name of error-span, right? And then after that span tag, we add a label, and then this will be HTML for username, and then the class name is going to be login-label, and then this will be email. After the label tag, then we can now put our input tag, type of text, name is going to be email, and let's actually change this HTML4 to email, because this is an email form, not a username form, right? So the name is email, and then we're going to add a class name of login INP, stands for login input, and then placeholder is going to be email, just like this. And then we can copy and paste our input and our label and modify it for our password field. So this is going to be password, HTML for password, and then type is also going to be password, name as well, password. Just like this. And then finally we add our submit button, which is going to be type submit, and then the value is also going to be submit, just like this. All right, let's go to our route.js file, and then we'll add that route. We'll just copy and paste this. It should be /login, and then above we're going to import that I'm using React Lazy. We'll just copy and paste this. We'll change this to login, and then the path is going to be / should be capital letter L, login, just like this. And then we can use the variable, change this. Requires auth, this is what gives us the authentication, so this will be false. And then if we head to our browser, we do /login, should take us to the login page, and this is what it looks like. Oh, this is not email, this is supposed to be password. Let's change that. So back in our login.jsx, placeholder is password. Before we do anything else, let's make sure this button on the navbar, the login button, takes us to the login page. So back in our components, navbar.jsx, we find the login button. It's down here. You can see inside of this logic if it's logged. So here we can just add the onClick event, and then we'll use navigate I think we already have a variable that says use navigate, and there it is, right? So navigate, here we just want to navigate /login, just like that. So let's go back to the home page, refresh, hit login, and we have the login page over here. So back in our login file, before we add any other thing, we need to actually handle the authentication from our API, right? So let's go back to our utils.js and create a new function to send that request. So let's go back to our utils.js and create a new function to send that request. We can say export const authenticate user, and that should be equal to async, and then const response is equal to await. Then we can call our axios, then we do axios.get, and then our login route. So what we want to do is, if you go back to our postman here, you can see we have this fake.api.com/users. So the endpoint is /users, and if we hit enter, we have a data for a bunch of users. So this is the API endpoint we are going to query, and we are going to check this array and check each user. And whenever we find a user with matching email and password, we will just authenticate that user and grab the user item. That's basically how we are going to implement this authentication. So first, let's grab our base URL over here. So we use backticks, $curly braces, and then we call our base URL. From our postman, as you can see, it's /users. Then outside, we can do /users. Now, this response is going to return this kind of object for us, an array of users, right? So what we want to do is we want to check the array and make sure the email we imputed and password actually match a user, and then we'll authenticate the user into our application and grab their whole item, right? So what we'll do is we'll say const authenticate is equal to response.data, right? This is the data we want. Let's actually grab the email. So this function is going to take the email we are imputing and the password. And that's what we use to find user from the response data. So we can do response.data. So this is now going to return this array for us, and then we can use the find method to find an object within our data. So find, here we want to find for each user, we want to find the user.email that is equal to our email, and also the same user.password that is equal to password. As simple as that. So we want to find a user with the email that is equal to the incoming email, and that same user has to have a password that is equal to the incoming password. If that is true, return authenticate, just like this. So if that is true, this is going to return true. If not, we are going to get null over here. The array is going to be empty. So we can make use of that. Back in our login.jsx, we are going to call that function. Let's start by importing the function we just created. So we can import authenticate user, and then we're going to create a handle login event over here. So we'll say handle login, and this is going to take an event, and in here we can write our logic. So first we need to do event.prevent default. So event.prevent default, we want the page to stay the way it is, and then we can do const get user is equal to async, and then in here we can now make use of our data, right? So first we start with const response, and then we use our authenticate function, authenticate user, and in here we need the email and password, but we haven't created any variables for that yet. So that's exactly what we're going to do. Up here we're just going to do const email set email, and then use state like this, and this is going to be empty, and then we can copy and paste this and change this to password, and then we can set our password over here. All right, so here the first thing we need to pass is our email, and then we also pass our password just like this. So now if we go back to our utils.js file again, you can see it returns the object for us if the user is available. So this find function is going to return the user data for us if the user is actually existent. That means if the email and password that is imputed is correct, corresponds to a user, is going to return that user object for us. If not, we are going to get an empty object. So back in our login.jsx file, we need to add a logic to check what is being returned. So we can use the ternary expression here and say response question mark should be s. We want to do something like set our data, else we want to return something else. So what do we want to do if there's response? We want to set our user object. So the user object is a global state which is going to be used in our cart page, and maybe if we have any other page that needs the user object. Ideally you want to store the user object inside of a context, or if you're using Redux, right? But here we're just going to use it in our app.js file and then pass it as a prop. So over here we're just going to come here, const, then we create the user object, user, and then we simply do set user. And this is going to be new state, and this is going to be an empty object just like that. So the login page is going to take the set user prop to set that user data just like this. So if the response is existent, what we want to do is set the user to the response. So this is going to give us all the data we want. If there's no response, we want to show the user an error message. So let's create another state for our error message here. So we'll say error msg, and then we can set our error msg just like this. So we can set over here, we can set our error msg and say invalid email or password just like this. So we'll now use this our error msg inside of this span tag that has the class name of error span. So we do curly braces, paste that in like this. So it's going to appear whenever we have an error message, right? So that's exactly what we want to do. Another prop we need is the set is logged value. This is a Boolean value that checks if the user is logged or not. So we want to set is logged over here, and then inside of this response arg2, inside of this response 2, we can put it inside of parentheses, add a comma, and then we can do set is logged, and then we can set that to true. So this is an ESLint error. It doesn't necessarily mean our code is wrong. It's just an ESLint no use expression, and we can just disable that over here. All right, so let's head back to our app.js file and create the isLogged state value. So we do const this is log value is what we use for our protected routes, so that's why it's really important. Set is logged, and then we'll initialize this to be false. Now based on our login.jsx file, we need two props, the set user and set is logged values. So back in our app.js file, we just go over here inside of our route component, we simply give it a prop of set user, and then we can add set user like this, and then right below it we can add our set is logged, and then we can set is logged just like this. All right, I think we've done everything properly, and to make sure, let's just kind of console.log our response to see if everything works. So after this whole thing, we can just do console.log response, and then we can do rest here, and then at the end of it we just need to call this function over here, get user, just like this. All right, before everything needs to work, we need to actually alter this email whenever the user imputes it inside of the input tags. So in here we just have to add an onChange, and that will be an arrow function up to add e, and then we can set, since this is for the email, we can set email and that will be e dot target dot value, just like this. Then we can copy this over, head over to our password input, and then this should be set password. And then we actually need to set the value of this to our state value. Value should now be our password. And the same thing applies for our input field for the email. Value should now be email, right? So we're actually changing this now. And then in our button, the button over here, we can add an on click, and then we can call the handle login over here. All right, so let's head over to our browser and test this out. Something seems to be wrong. All right, after refreshing, it just came back. So let's go to our Postman and get a dummy user data from the API. So we have an email with kevin.gmail.com, like this, and then we paste that in, and then the password is some kind of gibberish, but I'm just going to copy that over, copy the password, paste it in here, and then let's open our console first before we hit submit. We'll have a warning, clear the console, submit, give that a while. As you can see, we have our response, we have the address, geolocation, city, and everything we need, the username, Kevin Ryan, and everything we need. So that works perfectly fine, and the user is actually got in for us whenever we click submit. Now we forgot to add another prop here, which is the is logged prop. This prop is supposed to come from the navbar. We need it here to make the button, the login button of the navbar, disappear whenever the is logged state is true. So here you can see we need the is logged from the navbar. In our app.js, we just head over to our navbar, and then we add the is logged, and then we give it not Kevin, we give it is logged like this. Let's see if we need any other props for our navbar. We just need 3 of them, and we've added the 3. We've added all 3 to them. As you can see, we no longer have our login button here because we are logged in. If we refresh, it should come back. We have it. If we log in, it should disappear again. All right, that's fine. All right, friends, welcome to this lesson. In this lesson, we are going to create our protected route, which is our checkout route. So first of all, as you can see, our checkout route requires 2 props, a user's prop and the cart items prop. Back in our app.js file, we haven't added the user prop over here, although we already have the cart items prop. What we can do is add that. We can say user, and then give it the user prop over here, and this is going to come from this user from the state. It's occurred to me that we gave this an underscore items, and the checkout page also needs it, so we can just add an underscore here, slash, and then we can add an underscore here, and that should work perfectly as well. So how I did that was I highlighted it and I hit Ctrl F2 or Command F2. So changing that to underscore cart items will make that work for us over here. Now let's actually protect the checkout page. If we go back to our route, you can see we set the requires auth to true. That means this is supposed to be a protected route. So back in our app.js, we need to add logic to not display protected routes and actually redirect the user back to another page when a route is protected, right? Inside of our map function, we need to add that logic. And if you recall from previous lessons, we added something like this before. So we can just simply say if route dot requires auth like this, and not is logged. So that means if a route requires authentication and the user is not logged, we don't want to display that route, right? So that's what we'll do. In our curly braces, what do we want to do when a route requires authentication but the user is not logged in? So we want to return the user to another route entirely. So we'll create a route just like this. This is giving us an error because we haven't added anything over here, but it's going to work. So in order to redirect the user to another page when a page requires auth and the user is not logged, we use the navigate from React Router DOM, right? So up here, we just need to import navigate navigate, and then again we need to pass the key prop here, and then that should be route dot path, like this. And then we need to also pass the exact keyword, and then we can do element, and then our element now is going to be the navigate component. So we can say navigate, just like this. We need now to add the replace keyword, so it knows we are replacing the route to a specific route. To which route? To the login route. So we want to navigate the user back to the login route when a route requires auth and the user is not logged. All right, let's actually clear this error now. We're just going to say else, and then we'll cut this entire route, cut that, and then we paste it in here. Apparently we still get an error. I don't know why that is occurring. Oh, the reason why that's occurring is because we have a parenthesis here rather than curly braces, right? This first one is the corresponding one, and then we do that, we do like this, and then everything works perfectly fine. So we had parentheses here before, but we needed curly braces. So with this logic, we've created our protected routes. So whenever a route has the required property to be true, which means it's a protected route, and the user is not logged in, we are going to redirect the user back to the login page. Or else it means either the user is already logged in, even if the route is protected, or the route is not even protected. So this else function is now going to run, and all other routes are going to show up. All right, let's head back to our browser and test that out. So back in here, if I refresh, why do we have an error? No route seems to be working. It seems like we have an error over here. Let's try to go to the home page. Nothing is showing. We definitely have an error. Let's look at the console and see what is being returned. No route matches logged in. We definitely do have an error here. Let's see if route that requires auth and that is not logged in. Turn this else. Oh, we forgot to add the path prop. Oh, that's my bad. Path, and then that should be route dot path, like this. I think that's the reason why we're having an error. If I go back, I refresh, okay, the error still persists. Now let's see why the error is still persisting. So we have a warning here: array map expected return to be returned at the end of arrow functions. Oh, that's because we forgot to add the return statement inside of our else condition here. So we just need to add return, and I think we should be good to go. We already have it in our if statement. So if we head back to the browser, all right, that works perfectly now. Okay, all right, so to test our protected route, we will now go to /checkout, and since we are not authenticated at this point, it should take us back to the login page. So let's try that. We do checkout, hit enter. You see, we are redirected back to our login page. But if we now log in, let's go to our Postman and grab a user. We'll grab the Kevin user email, and then we paste it in here, and then we change the password, and then we paste it in here. If I click submit, since you can't see the login button here, we've been authenticated. But the problem is, if I go to checkout now, we'll still get redirected, because whenever we go to a page from our URL, the entire app restarts, so all of our state gets destroyed. So we can only access that from within our application using buttons inside of our application to navigate there. So what we want to do now to test that, we just want to add objects to our cart. So we'll add 3, and then we go to our cart, and then we hit on checkout. Oh, we forgot to add an on-click event for this checkout button to take us to the checkout page. So let's go back and do that. In our cart page, we have checkout. Here you can add our on-click event, and then that should take us to okay, we need to initiate our navigate function. Navigate. Okay, we need to do the const navigate is equal to use navigate, like this, and then we can use the navigate function over here. Navigate, checkout. This should now take us to the checkout page. And back in our code, if we click on checkout, now we need to log in. Let's go back to our Postman, grab a user. Let's grab the password first, paste that in, grab the email, copy, paste that in, and then we submit. Now if we click on our cart again, and then we click on checkout, we now have our checkout page fully functional. You can see the shipping address, the biller is Kevin Ryan, and the biller is Kevin Ryan, and your total due is this. So pay now. You can see we have our checkout page because we're authenticated. If I refresh, our state gets refreshed, and that takes us back to the login page because we can't access that page unless we're authenticated. All right. So that's how we implement protected routes. In the next lesson, we're going to use transition animation. So we have a subtle fade in, fade out whenever we navigate from one page to another. See you in that lesson. All right, guys, in this lesson, we're going to create transition animation for our project. If we go to the finished version of the project, you can see, if we go to the home page, we have this cool fade in, fade out. Go to the product, fades in, fades out. Go to the about us, fades in and fades out. So that's what we want to add to our project now. So first, we need to npm install React transition group. So it's not part of our package.json file, and we need to add that now. So I'm just going to do npm install React-transition-group. Again, you can use any animation library you want to achieve this, but React transition group uses pure CSS, which I think a lot of people can understand. That's why I'm using it here. So npm install React transition group, allow that to install, and it's done. We'll just do npm start to keep our environment running, and then we'll leave that to keep starting. So to implement that, we go to our app.js, and then we need to add that inside of here. So first, let's import. So the first thing we need to import from React transition group is switch transition. Should be switch transition and CSS transition, just like this. These are the two things we need to import. Inside of our div container over here, right below our navbar is where we are going to create our transition animation. All right, so we'll just call that component transition. No, that should be switch transition. And in here, we also need to call our CSS transition. So CSS transition, I'm just going to make this a component, just like this. And then inside of our CSS transition, we can cut our whole router starting from the suspense component here. We'll just close that, cut everything, including our suspense component, and paste it inside of our CSS transition. All right, so the switch transition has a component prop, which expects a component. Since we don't have any component to give it, we're just going to make that null. So we'll just say component is equal to null, just like that. And then our CSS transition is actually the one that is going to be responsible for making all the CSS animations when we're transitioning from one page to another, right? So first we need to pass it a key prop. We'll define that later, and then it needs a class name. This class name, we'll call it fade. That's the name of the animation we'll use. And then the timeout is going to be 300 milliseconds. And then we want to unmount on exit. This is going to unmount the animation once the animation is done showing up. All right, this key property doesn't take a key like a map function, right? It needs the location, the current location our app is in. And for that, we need to grab location from our use location hook from React router. So import use location from React router, and then we can do const location is equal to use location, just like that. So this key is going to be our location dot path name, just like this. So this value is going to give us the path name, and whenever this changes, the CSS transition is going to know that, okay, we've changed our route, and then it needs to run the animation for us. Now let's define the animation. We'll define the animation in our app.css file. You can see we have some CSS over here, and this is where we'll define our animation. Our animation needs to start with fade enter. So that means what happens at the beginning of the animation. So that should be fade, And this has to be exactly fade, because if you go back to our app.js, you see the class name is fade. So that is how React transition group identifies the animation we've defined. So fade, and then we can use hyphen enter to specify the beginning of the animation, and then we want the opacity to be 0. So at the beginning of the animation, the opacity will be 0, and then at the middle, so we'll do animation enter dash active. This is sort of like the middle of our animation. We want the opacity to go back to 1, and then we have to set our transition to opacity, and then that should take 300 milliseconds with ease dash in, just like this. And then when our animation is about to exit, so fade dash exit, obviously we want the animation to be back to 1, and when the animation is, once the animation is done exiting, that's at the end of it, so we'll do animation exit dash active. We can have our opacity to be 0, and then our transition can be opacity. That should also take 300 milliseconds to be consistent, and then ease out, just like this. So again, you want to make sure all of your animation, all of your properties start with .fade, 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 right? So this is how we define our animation for our transition. Back in our app.js, the last thing we need to do is, inside of this our route component, we need to pass the location prop to it, so it can change this location variable here whenever we go to another route. So the route, we're just going to add a prop, the location prop, and then we'll pass the location value we initiated over here. So this location prop, we just set it to this location value, and whenever that changes, our CSS transition will know and it will, activate. Let's head back to our browser. All right, now if we go to the product page, you can see we have a subtle animation whenever that happens, right? If we go back to the home page, you can see we have the fade in, fade out. Product page, we have the fade in, fade out. Let's hit on login. The fade in, fade out exactly the way we wanted it. All right, that's perfect. Now I think we've implemented 99% of everything we need to know about React Router in this application. We also added this cool functionality where if we hit the shop, it goes to the home page and then it scrolls back down, and that didn't work because 300 milliseconds we set is also the exact same amount of time we set to do the transition animation. We can simply adjust that back in our navbar, change this 300 to, let's say, 500, and then we go back to another page, we hit on shop. As you can see, it now works. In the next video, we are going to add finishing touches to this project, and then after that we are going to summarize everything we've learned, and then we'll conclude the course. I want to thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch these lessons up till this point. Not a lot of you will do that, but for you guys that are here, thank you guys so much, and I hope you've learned a lot at this point. Now in the next video, like I said, we'll add finishing touches to this website, like when we click on this shop now, and if we click on shop, it should still go back down and stuff like that. So we are just going to add finishing touches in the next lesson, and after that we'll summarize and then we'll conclude the course. Thank you guys once again. I'll see you in the next lesson. Alright guys, welcome to this lesson. So let's start with this shop now button here to take us to all of the product page. So back in our code, we just go to our hero.jsx in our component folder. This shop now, we just simply add an on-click event, and this is going to be navigate, and then we want to navigate to products, just like this. So let's create our navigate variable. First, we import use navigate from React Router DOM. Import use navigate from React Router DOM, and then we can do const navigate is equal to use navigate, just like that. So if we head back to the browser, click shop now, it now takes us to the product page. The next thing we need to do is in our login page, whenever we hit on submit, we need to add this loading, this loading view over here. All right, so back in our code, in our login.jsx, we just need to add a state over here that says loading. So const loading, and we want to set loading and that's going to be a boolean. First of all, we will initialize it to be false, right? So we want this to start loading whenever the handle login is running. So first, at the beginning, we'll set loading to true, right? And whenever the response comes back at the end, we'll just set loading to false. As simple as that. And then we can grab this login state over here and use it in our submit button. So here, we can just add curly braces to this, and then we'll say, so what we'll do is, if not loading, that is the only time we want submit, or else we want to give it a loading, right? You see the loading here we are seeing here is kind of dark. That's because the button is disabled whenever it's loading. So we can actually add that over here. We can say disabled. So we can say disabled, and then we can do is equal to, if loading, disabled will be true, else disabled will be false. So if we go back to our browser and we head to the development environment, if we refresh, we click on login, then we just use something, and then we click on submit. You see that works perfectly for us, and we also have our error message that says email or password is incorrect. All right, so the last thing we need to do is add our about us page, and also we actually forgot to add a not found page. Let's do that first of all. So here in our routes, so in our pages, we are just going to create another component that says not found. That should be .jsx, and that's simply going to return a h1. So let's do const not found is going to be equal to arrow function, and we're going to return a h1 tag that says page not found. And then in the end, we can export default not found, just like this. And then in our route page, in our routes.js, we can just create another path for it and then paste it in here. So our not found page, if you guys recall from our previous lessons, we just need to add the # over here, the # symbol. So whenever the user goes to a route outside of all of these routes, it's going to return this component over here, which is going to be our not found component, right? Hope that makes sense. So let's go over here and test a random path like this, hit enter. You can see we have page not found. Now let's actually implement our about us page, and which we haven't added. So again, in our pages folder, we're just going to create another JSX file, and this is going to be about.jsx, and then you can do const about. That should be equal to an arrow function, and then we can export default about, just like this. All right, in here we can just return a div like this. So if we go back to the finished version of the app, in our about us page, you can see we have an about us page, so you can know about us. So I'm just going to go and create that inside of our opening div. We'll create another div with the class name of sub container, and inside that div we'll create another div with the class name of about header, just like this. And then inside of that div again, create another h1 tag, give it a class name of header-h1, and inside our h1 tag we are just going to add the value of about, an about us page, so you can know about us, just like this. So actually in between the can we need a br tag. We need 2 br tags, so we can accomplish this over here, so you can know about us, just like this. And the next thing we need to do is add this welcome to T-Store, your ultimate decision for all the trendy teas. All right, so we close our about header. When we close our about header, outside of that div we create another div and give it a class name of content-cont, just like this. And then inside we also have another div. Needs a class name of left span, just like this, left span. And then inside there we're just going to write welcome to T store, your ultimate destination for all the trendy tees, just like this. And then we just need to add a bunch of BR tags. So we have BR, make this 3, copy and paste, and then below that we just add a button tag, and then here we are just going to say shop with us today. Now this is definitely going to navigate us to the product page, so we need to use an on click and the use navigate function here from React Router DOM. So let's import that right above our about. Let's say import use navigate, and then inside of our component we can just say const navigate is equal to use navigate, just like this. And then we can call it inside of this on click event, and that should navigate us to the product page, just like that. Now we need to add it to our route. So inside of our route, let's just copy and paste our login route, paste it, and then we change this to about, like this. And then we'll import our about us page. We'll import our about us page from lazy, so do const turn this to about us, about, then this should be / about, just like this. Just use that, change the component. Then if we head back to our browser, we now go to / about, hit enter. You can see we have our about us page. Click on this shop with us, takes us to the product page. Now if you click on this about link from the navbar, it doesn't work, so let's actually implement that as well. So from the navbar, the JSX file, we just need to search for it. Here we go, it's an A tag. We'll just change that to a link tag, and then it will take us to / about, just like that. If we head back, click on it again, it now takes us to the about us page. Click on shop with us, takes us to the product page. Click on home, we go back home. Click on about, it goes to about. Click on shop, home page, and then slides down. All right, that works perfectly. I think we are done with this project. Once again, thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch all of these lessons up to this point. I know just about 20% of you guys will make it this far. If you're among those 20%, pat yourself on the back, and I hope you have learned enough about React Router at this point.